Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh man, this is going to be such an amazing show. I know every week I say, "Oh, it's going to be a great show. It's going to be," and they are, okay. But then a topic comes at me, and I get re-inspired because Denise Blanc is going to join us again. She wrote this book called River Logic: Tools to Transform Resistance and Create Flow in All of Our Relationships. And let me tell you what we're doing. I brought her back because we both listened to the previous show that we were on, and we thought it was pretty good. You can go back and you listen. We thought it was a pretty good show. But here's what started to dawn on me as I was re-looking at the book again. And it was that so often in our business relationships, especially if you're a leader, but even not, and even in our personal relationships, we have difficulties with people who don't think like we do. And that puts angst into the conversation. And so often what happens, and I just said this to Denise before the show started, I get the sense that so often we're in conversation and we're just waiting for somebody to say the wrong thing so that we can pounce on them and say, "See, that's who you are." And that's not the world that Denise and I want to live in. Denise and I want to live in a world where, yes, we can openly disagree, but we don't have to lose the relationship. The relationship can remain intact. We could still communicate with each other in an effective way where we could still be productive. We could still be efficient. We could still be effective. And we could still care about one another without absolutely having to agree on every single thing. That's the world I want to live in. And even though Denise has not openly said it, she's nodding her head like she agrees with that's the world she'd like to live in too.
Absolutely.
And is there a way to do that? And the answer is yes. And you go, well, the book's named River Logic. Yeah, well, she uses the analogy of the river to help us understand how we can communicate better with each other. If you've never been on a river, right, running the rapids, right, it doesn't take long to get that analogy in your head. Things can get a little sticky pretty quick. How do you navigate that? Isn't that what our communication is? Isn't it navigating communication so that we can actually maintain the relationship, still be effective, still be productive, and still have a relationship at the end of it where we can bring the canoe or the kayak to shore, right? And still be at peace. I don't know. I think so, and I think Denise does too. Matter of fact, I know Denise does. She wrote the book. So we're going to work through that today in the book. But before we do that, let's do what we do every week, right? Well, the truth of the matter is, every week I walk you through your 4-part person, right? Your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual person. And the truth of the matter is, we are 4-part people, and if we're not working on each one of these areas, we're not growing. And my philosophy: if we're not growing, we're dying because we never stay static, which is the truth. And so what I have you do is evaluate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being, ugh, boy, that's pretty bad. And then 10 being, oh man, that is awesome. By the way, whatever your number is in each one of them, even if it's ugh, okay? And I don't know how to spell that. Otherwise I would spell it for you. But whatever that is, right? I don't want you to go, man, I'm doomed. That's no. Whatever your number is, even if it's low, that's your starting point to improve, right? That's your place to find your new direction. All right, so let's take the physical area. Scale of 1 to 10, 5 being average. How would you say you're doing? Exercise, eating right, drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, doing what to do to take care of your body. A scale of 1 to 10, 5 being average, what would you say, right? Okay, you got that number? All right, so if you're a real low number, right, what you're thinking is, okay, well, I'm a 2. I haven't really taken care of my body. Okay, so I'm a 2. What can I do different? What can I change right now? What can I do? Right? Is it put down the bag of chips? Stop drinking sodas? Maybe get rid of the fast food diet? What is it? Right? You can change something. right? If you're a higher number, regardless of what you're at, it's a little tougher because you're doing probably most of the right things, but you got to tweak it a little bit to improve it because this is a journey. Okay. So that's first number. Second number is the mental, intellectual number, right? Truth of the matter is we're right brain, left brain people, right? We have two halves of the brain. Those brains need to be worked on all the time. The right brain is that creative side. The left brain is our logical side. And we've got to be working on that. We've got to find ways that we're exercising the brain. We have to grow on our wisdom and knowledge and understanding of what we do, and how we do it. And that can include our personal lives and our professional lives, right? One great way to do that is read a book. That's a great way. That enhances both halves. But there's other things you do, right? I mean, you read a book, you can take up a foreign language. That'll help you grow both halves of the brain, right? Doing the right thing. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say you're doing? All right, so that's your second number. Third number, all right, it's the emotional number, right? Real simple. How well are you able to control your emotions under stress and pressure, like even when you're hangry? And then 2, how well are you able to tap into and really understand the emotions of another human being? Ooh, right? You think the first one's hard, the second one's tough, right? Because that means that you actually have to, Denise is going to talk about this too. Listen, really listen. You got to be present to do that. And then you have to have the emotional vocabulary to deal with it. Because if you're going to get through the rapids of a tough conversation to communicate, well, you're going to have a vocabulary. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how you say you're doing there? And then finally, the spiritual area. And, spiritually, here's the thing. Spiritually, we're all spiritual. But we all have faith in something. Right? If you take a sip of coffee and you did because you believed it wasn't poisonous, that's kind of faith. If you pushed the button on your car believing it was going to start, that's faith. If you made plans for the future at all, that's faith. If you saw the stoplight sign with the hand that says walk and you believe that people are not still going to drive across that red light, that's faith. Right? The fact of the matter is we all live by faith in everything that we do. It is what we do. But beyond that, the other thing is that what brings you back to centeredness and peace in the midst of chaos? Right? Yeah, I mean, is it God? Is it nature? Is it meditation? Is it something else? And then the question you have to ask yourself is it working? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you say your spiritual life is doing? Those 4 areas are like the air in the tires of your car. And the area if you think about it, if one tire is a little low, what happens? The car veers. It's harder to drive. It makes things harder to steer. If all 4 tires are too low over the course of time, you're going to ruin the car. Well, speaking of someone who's got her tires all to the right height, her name is Denise Blanc, and she's trained as a mediator, facilitator, emotional intelligence coach. She's also a teacher of somatics. She's the founder of River Logic Partners, a leadership coaching and consulting firm that support leaders and teams around issues of communication, conflict, and change. With the foundational belief that strong leadership requires candor, courage, and compassion, she teaches skills to tackle tough conversations while also creating cultures of high trust. She helps others to build deeper and more meaningful connections, even across their wide differences. And her book, River Logic, Tools to Transform Resistance and Create Flow in All of Our Relationship, is her journey and research thus far, using the metaphor of the river and qualities of water as our teacher, all with the hope of creating a world where we have more self-awareness, civility, and openness with each other. And I totally agree with her. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to A New Direction, Denise Blanc. Denise, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, well, I am excited to have you back. I feel like first of all, it's been a long time, but it's great to have you back. And I really wanted to attack this book from a different mindset because I felt like we should. So Denise, we live in a world of conflict, I feel. And I feel that our communication is always at conflict. And by the way, not all conflict is first bad, all right? But I think the problem is that oftentimes in leadership, and you've been awarded, leadership in for doing leadership. And one of the things that I often find is that when leaders are trying to communicate to their employees, they they what they're really trying to do is get their employees to do what they want to do, what they want them to do. And at the same time, there's the employee who says, I don't know that I want to do what you want me to do. And we can get at a little bit of an impasse. So, and then there's a personal life. And you and I just talked before that. So I'm married. I'm going to be married 25 years coming up. And, and it's awesome. But it's not always been perfect communicating wise. So how do we start approaching a place where, as a leader, regardless of where that is, that we're at a place where the communication's at a conflict? Where do we start?
I think that, first of all, conflict for a lot of people is a word they hate.
Yeah.
The experience is something they don't want. And most people, from my research, are seriously conflict avoidant. Like maybe 75%.
Yeah.
Here's the good news and the bad news. Conflict just is. It's inevitable. It's literally inevitable. You will have differences of opinion. You will have different ways of thinking and feeling, no matter how nice of a person you are. So you get people together. So the problem for people who want to avoid it at all costs is good luck.
Oh, that's so awesome. Okay, let's take a situation and let's utilize some of the tools that you've put together in this book, right? Let's say we're in a situation, leadership, there's a merger going on between two companies. And this merger is happening, and you've got a way that things have always been done around here, right? Kind of their culture. And this new company comes in that's taking over and is about to change the culture, and it's causing some issues. And the new CEO wants to get the other employees on board, but they're being resistant because they're about to go through a culture change. Where would that leader, what should that leader be thinking about? Where should they start? Because the current's going to be pretty fast here.
Yeah. Well, I think some of us have been in those situations and often not seen it done well. So I haven't seen it done well that often. But you read case studies where it is done well, and I know how it could be done well. And a lot of it begins with a leader who's communicating. I mean, communication is the key to so many things. And a leader who is communicating who they are, what their vision is, where they're taking the organization, what's been good that they want to keep, what are some of the things they're going to shift. It's hard to lead if no one's following.
Right.
So you have to really develop that leadership vision and get people on board. And it may be that you do it in small focus groups, one-on-one, an all hands meeting. But that is really going to be a key piece of getting people engaged and also listening to them. So in the small groups, it's really hearing where some of the challenges are and really being able to acknowledge them instead of steamroll through them. Because people have history with an organization. They care about that. To completely throw out all of that is really not going to be that easy for this new leader in terms of getting people on board.
Yeah. I'm sorry to cut you off here, but I'm just thinking through something that you just kind of just triggered me, and something you said in the book. I know that confluence is where two rivers meet. And I know this is not the perfect analogy because we're talking about a merger, but I can't help get rid of it. And then you talked about listening, because in that chapter, you talk about listen with heart and curiosity. And so I start thinking through the biases that you talk about and having to be, I guess, being more self-aware. Can you dig into there a little bit? In this case?
Are you still talking about the leader needing to
Yes.
be?
Yeah. Can we talk about that merger in terms of, and that leader taking over another company where that is related to chapter 2, where you're listening with heart and curiosity to help make that change?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, think about this leader having a lot of people they need to influence.
Mhm.
In conversations, we may be just talking to one person or a couple people. So that leader has to be really aware of the culture that they're wanting. And so there is a lot of listening and asking questions and not just saying, this is my way or the highway.
Right.
Um, because people will, if they want to keep their job, they will follow, but they will follow very reluctantly and they will do whatever they can to sabotage.
Mhm.
So in the long run, you really haven't gotten buy-in.
And there's this thing that you talk about in this chapter that I think all of a sudden applies to this, as I'm developing this out, and it's perspective taking. And you have 4 perspectives: listening to self, I perspective, we perspective, and it perspective. How would those fit into our example? The listening, I, we, and it.
Well, the I perspective is really the work that we're doing with ourselves. What do I think? What do I believe? How do I feel? What do I want? It's really doing some reflection on that and getting really clear maybe why it's important for you. And that's some work that we need to do with ourselves, maybe with a partner as a listening partner. But if we just stay with that and then focus and push, we can kind of see what kind of results we're going to get. The I perspective, which we often see out there, this is my way,
Mhm.
is not going to be that helpful. So the we is when we get into dialogue, like, and asking questions and listening. Like, what will it take? Or how can we make these changes work? Or what are some suggestions you have to get people on board who maybe are resistant? Or there's a whole range of kind of conversations that move into the we,
Mm.
that are really important. So, I like to think when you're in the we conversation, you're standing next to each other. You're
Mhm.
not across from each other. You're really looking out at the horizon, and at the horizon is sort of the it. Like the it is like, okay, here are the issues that why we need to make the change. This is what's going on in our company. This is what's going on in the industry. These are all kinds of reasons that we have kind of decided we need to do X, Y, Z. And they're hopefully data. That's what the it conversation is. It's like really specifics and concrete. And so all those conversations become really useful. If we just talked about the we, but you never gave any of your feelings or your thoughts, that's not enough. If we just talked about the it conversation, here's the data, here's the reason, but we never got into how I feel, how you feel, it's not enough. And so that's why I think those perspectives all come together to become a much richer, engaging conversation.
Yeah, when you talk about the I, we, and the it, so simple, so practical, and yet we have to, and you can't just have one. You really do have to have all 3 constructively to make it work. And that's what I think we miss most often is, right? I mean, we do have to have all 3.
It's a good little diagnostic, really, when you
Mm.
think about it,
Mm.
because I've never actually talked about this with anybody quite like you and I are talking about it right now, but especially with the example you're giving,
Right.
that you can begin to see where things have gone awry,
Yeah.
um, like what's getting missed.
Yeah.
And I think this I piece is really important. People really need to hear how someone is thinking and
Mhm.
feeling.
Yeah.
This is how I've thought it through. And this is why I'm making these decisions that I'm making. And this is what I'm concerned about if we don't do it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
powerful.
It is powerful. And the more I kept thinking about it, especially as I was trying to apply it to different situations, I was doing the same thing you did. I had that aha moment with it going, it's really a very simple but yet pragmatic and practical piece here. Am I using all three of these perspectives? Is it the I, we, and the it? Because I got to have them. I got to have all three. And if I'm not achieving all three of them, I am not communicating.
Well, you're not communicating well.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, I'm not communicating effectively, right? Yeah, I just love that. I love that part of it. Her name's Denise Blanc. The book is entitled River Logic: Tools to Transform Resistance, Create Flow in All of Our Relationships. We're just getting started. You're going to enjoy more of her, I promise, because we're going to be dealing with these type of examples all throughout the show. You're listening to her here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, Epic Physical Therapy, whether you're recovering from an injury, surgery, suffering everyday aches and pains, having difficulty performing daily activities, maybe a professional athlete looking to just improve how you move and feel, the elite team at Epic Physical Therapy will provide you with a customized treatment program that is just for you when you're looking for your epic relief, your epic recovery, and epic results. Go to epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors for more than 38 years helping people transition in life. Whoa, Jay, I thought you said that they were real estate people. They are. But think about it. When it comes to transitions in life, right? Every place you've ever moved, it's been a life transition. It has. Well, they've helped thousands of people being able to make that life transition smoother, right? Help take some of the stress out and make the process easier. So when you're ready for your next life transition, you want to reduce the stress in that transition. People they really do know their business when it comes to your life and the housing industry. Go to Linda Craft Team in Realtors. It's lindacraft.com. It's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend Denise Blanc, her book, River Logic: Tools to Transform Resistance and Create Flow in All of Our Relationships. The reason, Denise, I used this example of a merger is because I feel like every relationship we have is a merger. So that, even as you and I are developing our relationship, it's a merger. You're bringing your own set of ideas. I'm bringing in my own set of ideas. How do we communicate that effectively? Are we good at it? Do we need to improve on it? What do I need to do? What do you need to do? How do we need to make that happen? But that also applies into businesses, because so often new leadership takes over. Well, that's a transition that acts like a merger, because all of a sudden a new leadership comes in and there's a culture shift or a culture change, and that makes things difficult. And I start thinking through your book here, right? And maybe we're at an impasse, right? And you talk about chapter 3. You look for more, look for and move through openings, right? And you start, and I start thinking about this in terms of, okay, I've got this new group of people. I'm a new CEO, or maybe as part of this merger, and I got to find some way to reach them, right? Because the merger is going to happen whether we like it or not. But the truth of the matter is, I really do need them in order to be successful. And so when you think about, moving through openings, and you start by talking about it's a mindset that we have to, that in terms of mindset, you say people tend to fall in opposite poles. So how do we adjust our mindset and be able to start finding the little cracks and the little areas that we can navigate this issue where we've got a big communication thing that we got to get through? Where do we start?
And when you're talking about you're talking about we as a leader.
Yes, we as leader. Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, we start with people, because people are going to make it or break it. And so who are some of maybe the people who are the early adopters and maybe the influencers that you can get on board? Some people need to dip their toe in the water. They're not going to make the changes really quickly. So it's going to take maybe more. We've talked, I don't know, I'm sure you've done work about Bridges' change cycle, and
yeah.
People come on quick. Some people, it's going to take a while. But it's back to what I think is like, how do we influence, and how do we share our vision and sort of paint it so that other people can see it.
Mhm.
And, there may be, I used to teach presentation skills a lot, and we would talk about um, some people need pathos. They need a lot of emotion, and that sways them. Other people need logos. They need logic.
Mm.
They need, okay, this is why. This is the specifics. And then other people, and it's really, some people need all of that, but the ethos, like why it's so important, the ethical part of
Mhm.
it, so that the pathos, logos, ethos, are going to sway different types of people.
Mhm.
But that's really what we need to learn how to do in terms of influence. And as I said, I think it's really sometimes conversations, maybe one conversation at a time that happens.
What about the mindset piece? I mean, from both perspectives, not just the leadership perspective of what their mindset needs to be, but even maybe the employee mindset. Because we're a little at odds here. Our cultures to change. What do we need to do with our mindset, and how do we go about changing that?
So in my book, I talk about the pole of optimism, pessimism. There's realism, but the new word that I was sharing in our last talk was this idea of being a possibilicist,
Right.
and that idea that there are possibilities that we can begin to see that allow us to move down that kind of more optimistic framework. And if we can't share, leader, what some of those possibilities are, people can just get stuck in their position.
Mm.
I notice, yeah, as a mediator, I haven't been doing it in a while, but I did many mediations. And one of the things that would happen is people arrive very stuck in their position. And they are solid like a rock, and they
Mhm.
often are sitting away from each other, hardly looking at each other. The tension in the room is palpable. And one of the things that I'm always fascinated by is watching some of the movement. And it usually comes when the way a mediation works is one person in their party gets to talk without being interrupted, and they share how they've seen the situation. The other person just can take notes, and then the other person gets their turn, and then we have them talking to each other. But one of the things that often happens in a mediation is you realize there's been a lot of misunderstandings of what is going on. And when people can begin to realize that they hadn't seen the situation quite right, other people, they'd misunderstood the other person, there's like more clarity, then you can start to see some movement happening, people starting to shift off their position a little bit. Okay, well, I can see that when maybe we can do this, or something that they were so hard and fast about all of a sudden shifts a little bit. So I think it goes back to the conversation. We have to begin to understand each other and where we're each coming from.
Yeah, there's something that you said in this book that I'm thinking about, because it is a negotiation at the end of the day, where we are negotiating terms. When in every conversation is a negotiation, I believe. We're negotiating something, or we're either trying to get our point across, or somebody's trying to get their point across, or we're at odds with somebody, but it's we're negotiating something. I believe you you have there's this subtitle you have in this chapter 3, which was the mother of all interventions, and you have these 3 steps: listen emphatically, empathetically. Sorry, well, emphatic is a good idea too. Listen empathetically, validate emotion, and add and it's 3 simple little tools that, if we're in that situation, whether we're a leader or an employee, these 3 things I think would be a beautiful thing to practice. Did I miss it?
No, I'm so glad you brought it up, actually, because it is the mother of all interventions, because it really works. So when you think about listening empathetically, that means if you were them, how would you feel?
Mhm.
So sort of really trying to do that, really tuning in, not, it's different than just thinking me as you're listening.
Right.
I'm thinking them. I'm feeling them. Okay, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of upsetness. And then the validate part is what about their position actually makes sense?
Mm.
Like, oh, I could see why you would feel that if that happened. If that happened to me, I might feel the same way. That makes sense. That particular step, you can watch it in real time and watch how the temperature just comes down when you do that.
Right, 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 right. And
And
then add and.
the and is now that you've validated, you can add a piece. And here's what else. I understand how you feel about that. And this is what was going on for me, why I made that choice. You're adding your piece on. They're more likely to listen. The and is more available now than it was before.
Mm.
Once you empathized, validated, now they're willing to listen, and you can share
Mm.
a different perspective, perhaps, or
Yeah,
add on to what they've said. And yes, that and
yeah. I love that. And that's it's. I think sometimes we want to use the word but instead of and. And because that doesn't work nearly as well as and, right? Especially in a VUCA world, right?
and
Volatile and complex ambiguous
here's
world.
the reason why. When you do but, you've just negated everything they said.
Right, 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 right. Exactly.
So if you want somebody to be defensive, just do but.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You can't be defensive without. Yeah. Wow, that's good. Yeah, and what a powerful three-letter word. The both of them are powerful three-letter words, but one works more positively and the other one doesn't. It works more defensive, creates defensive. Yes, that's good. That's good. It's just simple, right? Conjunctions, right? This is the power of conjunctions, right?
And I share in my book the example of improv, because if you've ever taken improvisation, it's the core component of improv. So whatever somebody's saying, you don't negate it. You just add with and.
Mm.
Whatever crazy thing they say, and you add your piece.
Right,
And it gets kind of hilarious.
right,
But it's a great practice.
right, right. In chapter 4, which is entitled "Discover the Path of Least Resistance," uh, I want to jump down to change, creating the change. And you say here the best approach to interrupt unhealthy patterns begins with a pause, and the pause principle. And so, in our situation here, where we've got this merger and you got this new leader and you've got these people from this other company who, the culture is about to change, how is a pause? What are we doing with a pause that can help make that change happen?
I mean, I'm not a leader and I don't know what the situation is, because this is just a theoretical.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's just,
But the thing is, the pushing forward, no matter what,
yeah,
is often what happens.
yeah,
The slowing it down rarely happens and needs to happen maybe more. And sometimes the situation doesn't allow for that,
right.
but there can be so when I think of a pause, I'm talking about 3 breaths, in a conversation. In a
Sure,
situation like that, could you take a little bit of time? I'll give you an example of something that's happening to me right now.
sure.
I am about to roll out a program. I have a small team. This is around a culture change for an organization. And we have come up with an academy, like a year-long thing that was going to start in September with the first program. We got some really hard feedback from people of color who were just beyond angry that there were really no people of color who were facilitating this program. And they were very strong in their feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided their feedback was so important that we need to stop the press. So even though we were going to start next month, we've decided to pause it and to actually take it in, hope to do some repair with some of these people, but also really actively look for some other facilitators to add on to. And the feedback is so important that we don't feel like we can be successful unless we take it in. And so that's just what's going on, is as intense and radical as it feels to do that.
Right. Well, you make a point that, and this is where I think change, where leadership, and also if I'm an employee in this particular hypothetical situation we're going, is that you say this, change is rarely a linear process. And yet as leaders, we tend to want to force a linear process, and it's anything but that, right?
Yeah. I mean, this whole thing about what does it mean to be a leader has to realize that it's going to be the people who are going to actually make the changes happen.
Right. Right.
So how do we influence the people?
Right.
And if we can learn those skills, I think we'll have much better leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I think about the linearity of it, is I think what often happens is, leaders have this particular vision and they just see it as this straight line moving up. Right. And what happens is they don't prepare often that it's never going to be a straight line. There are going to have pauses and breaks. Things are going to break down, and you have to prepare for that. And you have to know that things are going to move really, really fast, and then things are going to move really, really slow. And both sides have to be willing to accept that it's just not going to be linear. And that's the part that, when I was looking at this chapter again, as I started thinking through this scenario, going, how often do we force linearity knowing that it's never going to be linear? Because have you ever been part of a company change or culture change where it was just straightforward every single time? I haven't.
No. Yeah. Well, I think when you involve people, things are messy. And we just don't like messes. But
Yeah,
that's
we do.
the way it is. It's not going to be often easy, but the repair work. I mean, I think some of the best stories I have around challenging interactions with people are when it was messy and we could do the repair work.
Right. Yeah, but because doesn't the other side of that, in your experience, when things are messy and you're able to work through it, doesn't it actually make a better relationship than it was ever?
I love the language of, I use the language, instead of conflict resolution, conflict transformation.
Yeah.
Because I actually think that, yes, you can transform a situation so that it's stronger as a result of having gone through things. Now you're in a long-term marriage and you've gone through things. Not everyone makes it, in long-term marriage, but if you can ride the waves together, over time, you're more likely to hang in there for the long haul.
Yeah, I think the one thing about, being married for 25 years, and I just think this is relevant to what we're talking about, and that is that I think we have developed a resilience muscle that that there's going to be times when we're not going to be in agreement, but you know what? There is a solid foundation that says we're okay because we've been through, other disagreements before, and we come out on the other side absolutely still loving each other, and I feel like it's those little things over the course of time that develop this resilience of being that we're still in this together. Nobody's quitting here. Nobody's giving up. And I think the same thing can apply, depending on how you do this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but even in a business situation, the more that your team can go through together, I think, when bigger challenges come, there is greater hope for you being successful through and what you call conflict transformation. At least that's how I see it. Do I got it wrong?
No, I don't think you have it wrong. I think there's just another piece to it. And the other piece is we have to really care about what's going on with the other person. So what do they need that they're not getting?
Right.
How are they feeling?
Yeah.
And being able to understand the needs and feelings allows us to be empathetic. And if we can do that, that we have a much better chance. And that's really where the transformation happens anyway. Like,
Yeah.
this is a silly little thing, but there's a New York Times article that I was just reading, and it became a viral article. It was sort of like why my marriage fell apart because I didn't do the dishes. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I've never seen it, but I love it. Go ahead.
But there's like a follow-up. I remember seeing it a long time ago, and the follow-up was this particular guy really reflecting on, it wasn't just that he didn't do the dishes. It was reflecting on the fact that his partner really wanted him to do that. And it wasn't a big ask. And the fact that he wouldn't do it again and again is what really destroyed over time their marriage. It's really poignant, really.
Yeah, it really is. Right. And it goes back to, the opening thing that I open with, right? In that, we talk about controlling our emotions, but how well are we able to truly tap into and understand the emotions of another person and then take action on it? It seems so simple when it comes out of my lips, but it's not that simple, because you as a person have to be able to truly want to tap into the other person's emotional state. You have to truly want to understand it. And then you're going to have some action that's going to help change that. And that's, by the way, that's not easy.
Well, it's not easy. It's not easy either way. It's not easy to understand how we're feeling, because it's usually not one feeling. It's usually a lot of different feelings.
Right.
And it's not easy to understand somebody else. So the only way we can truly understand is by asking.
Beautiful. Yeah. So simple. So simple. She's so simple, right? And yet so practical, right? Just ask. Denise Blanc, her book, River Logic, Tools to Transform Resistance, Create Flow in All of Our Relationships. You're listening to her here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, Epic Physical Therapy. My physical therapist, I think they should be yours too, by the way. They offer the most advanced top-of-the-line equipment, including the Ultra G anti-gravity treadmill, the Normatec compression sleeves, the Game Ready, my favorite, is ice and water compression all at the same time. They're trained and certified in the most comprehensive cutting-edge treatments available, like blood flow restriction therapy, dry needling, cupping. That's just a few. When you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, epic results, just go to epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com, and Linda Craft Team Realtors for more than 38 years, serving the world, helping them sell and buy their home, make the life transition. They're independently owned and operated, unaffiliated with any national brand, so they know who the best real estate professional is in your area, regardless of what company they work for. If you want to know, if you're ready to sell a home, buy a home, and you go, who's the best person in my area? Right? Well, she could tell you, because she's made relationships with the best possible professionals, real estate professionals in your area. So when you're ready to sell, ready to buy, talk to the person who knows. Talk to Linda Craft Team Realtors. That's lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend Denise Blanc, her book, River Logic, Tools to Transform Resistance and Create Flow in All of Our Relationships. And we're doing something a little bit different with this book. We're kind of using an example and kind of having fun. And I hope you're having fun with it. It's kind of a mental challenge, but it's kind of fun applying these principles in a very different and practical way. I hope you're enjoying it, at least, Denise. I am.
Well, it's a great, Jay, because I think if this is going to hold any weight, it's got to work. And I'm calling them principles because I think if you apply a principle,
Right.
it should work.
Yeah. I want to take a look at something that you said in chapter 5, Open to Influence. And it is bridge building and lessons learned from building bridges. And here's the practical pieces that stand out to me. Refrain from the binary, listen to understand another's point of view, and realize that understanding does not mean agreement. Get to know people who are different from you, listen actively and respectively, refrain from blame. And you have a list of these. These are so practical. And the first one, refrain from the binary, is one of the most difficult things, I believe, in today's world that we struggle with. When it comes to building bridges, if we're going to build a bridge between two people who don't think like we do, let's talk about refraining from the binary.
It's the way we're wired. I mean, most of us are wired this way. So it's in the air we breathe, the culture we live in. So let's just say that. So to be able to start shifting is to become aware that rarely is one thing completely right and the other completely not.
Right.
So there's multiple truths in the world. And so that perspective really shifts how we can listen and talk to somebody. Like, what is there in the other argument? We may not agree with most of it.
Right.
But is there a element that we can find some resonance with, that we actually can go, okay, I get that.
Right.
And that actually, that even if it's a very small piece,
right,
is really where that kind of commonality, where we start to build the bridge.
Okay. This is where I don't have a problem, but this is where I think people have a problem, and I'm speaking as a psychological professional now. Right? Is because when we operate in a 1 or 0, a very binary, call it black or white, 1 zeros, whatever you want to call it. Whenever we eliminate gray area, while we like it because it simplifies our life, because it's easier for us to do, but it's not reality. Getting us to shift out of the binary is critical to the communication process, but I almost think psychologically it's one of the most difficult things for us to do because we are not comfortable in gray areas. What's your thought?
Yeah, no, I think it has to start with intention. We have to care enough that we're wanting to build a bridge and that we understand that we need each other to get to XYZ, wherever we're going. And with that kind of understanding, it may begin to soften some of that kind of unwillingness to look, at some of the gray area. Without it, we're just rocks, like I say in the book.
Yeah.
Just like, and we know where that goes, and if it's in conflict, sometimes it goes to court, right?
Right.
And let the judge decide.
Right.
Let the jury decide.
Which brings me to point 2 that you make, and listen to understand another's point of view and realize that understanding does not mean agreement. Why do you think this is so difficult for people, that if they listen to a point of view that is not like theirs, that they feel like on some level? I mean, I have my own psychological idea of why they do this, but I want to hear your perspective. And why is it when people go, well, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm just not going to listen to that. Because is there a fear that if they listen to another point of view that they've compromised themselves? What do you think it is when they say, because it's critical?
I think they're triggered. So your nervous system is totally triggered. You're hearing something that maybe is against your values, everything you believe. And so your nervous system is now in the throes of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, and you are activated. You are so activated. So when you're activated, it's really hard to listen. It's really hard to listen to another point of view. So there's a step that has to happen, which is how do you regulate your nervous system? How do you find a way to come to some level of neutral so that you really can listen? And I have some strategies that I do and that I
Sure.
I mean, the one we talked about, which is the 3 breaths, is like your go-to. It can be there for you anytime, any place. It allows you to just begin to quiet your nervous system. So that pause. The other thing that I share is a technique that I learned. I've learned it in a couple different ways, but I learned it, when I was writing the book from one of the people I interviewed, that is called self-distancing. And the way it works is you start to notice you're completely triggered by what somebody's saying. So you're no longer listening. To yourself, you say, instead of like, why am I so upset? Or you shift to a third person and you just kind of look at yourself as, oh, Denise is really upset right now. You use third person. And what it does is it gives you a little bit of psychological distance from the immediate situation. In other kind of places I've heard, you get on the balcony and you look down, you're watching yourself. But the same is true. You're giving yourself a little space so you're not just stuck in it, and you can listen to the person without that kind of trigger, which is really important if you want to actually be able to reflect what they said and have them know that they're being heard. So that's a technique that actually has to happen. But you have to do something. And there's probably lots of other techniques in terms of being able to get your body to the point where you actually can listen.
And I'm going to jump from that to something that you say in chapter 7 that just resonated with me as you were talking. And that is, I can hear somebody, I don't actually hear them, by the way, just to let you know, I'm not having anybody yell in my ear, but I can hear someone in the listening audience say to me, Denise, you don't understand. That's just the way I am. Okay. So, now what are you going to do? How do you, and you say this, of course, in chapter 7, because you say it's called Making the Shift in section 2. And you say to me, people will say that's just the way I am. And I hear this a lot when there's differing opinions, or when I will say to someone, there's a better way to handle this situation. If I'm coaching, there's a better way to handle that. Well, that's just the way I am. What's your response to that?
I think you can change. I mean, if you want to change, I think there's other ways of doing it. Yeah, there's lots of realities. I mean, I really like, life is much more paradoxical than anything. Yeah. And so that this idea of multiple things can be true at the same time is, now not everyone can accept that. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we're going to make anybody change, but I think that if we listen with a lot of respect and openness to somebody else, they are much more likely to do the same for us. Even people who are really like that, who are tight and tough. There's a certain softening that happens, and it may be much more work on your part, emotional labor, but it is possible.
Yeah, well, I think that the thing is, when I hear somebody say, it's just the way I am, right? I've already found out they've already told me that they have a closed mindset, versus, and Carol Dweck did so much work on open mindset, closed mindset. And that meaning that I'm sorry, I should say growth mindset versus fixed, although she did that work too. Because if you have a growth mindset, you're saying, I can change. If you have a fixed mindset, you say, not only can they not change, but you're saying that you can't change either. Right? And so when we operate from a growth mindset, it's saying, okay, I've got some growing to do here. I don't have to agree with you, by the way, but I can grow and change, and saying that's just not just the way I am, because I'm always changing. And you talk about how important, being in constant curiosity and learning is, and growth. And I wonder if it goes back to this mindset issue. If we're stuck in a fixed mindset when we say that of, well, that's just the way I am, then there's no growth. Thought?
Yeah. And so, are we getting an echo here?
No,
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that people who believe something is true, we know it's pretty self-fulfilling. And if they can be open to exploring it differently, that's kind of where some of the possibilities lie.
right.
And we can't make people different.
No.
And so one of the things we haven't really talked about that I actually think could be some of the secret sauce.
Okay, let's see. I love secret sauces.
I'm hesitant to use the word, but it's really love. That there's a kind of, and if love is too much, it's just kind of appreciation or warmth or, seeing their best side or there's all that. But people need to feel seen and heard and appreciated. And any way we can do that allows people to calm down and to soften themselves. And I just feel like where we're at right now is all we see is like we see them as evil. And when we start doing that with condescension or
Right.
sneering or, we are activating what could end up being really like violence. I share about a book that really made a difference for me when I was researching this book was this book called High Conflict by Amanda Ripley. And she talks about conflict on a continuum. And she talks about people who are what she calls fire starters, or the people who will incite that on one end, who could be violent. And that the other side of conflict is where we're just trying to be better people. And we are not gonna, the fire starters are going to be really hard for us to intervene with or navigate with, but there's lots of room on the other side of working with conflict. And in her book, she shares some incredible case studies of some of those people who were the fire starters,
Right.
and how they began to shift over time. And a lot of it had to do with empathy, understanding somebody else. They're very powerful examples.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time. But I think just to hammer in on the point, as I have Bob who's been typing in questions. I don't think anybody's telling you to ever think that you have to think like someone else. I don't think that's what we're ever saying on this. I think the bottom line is I have to listen if I expect any sort of change and to influence, right? But I think what we want to do is we so often want to go, I don't think like you, and I don't want to think like you. So we're not having a conversation, and we close it off. And that's not the point. The point is, how can I get someone who doesn't think like me that we can still be productive down the road? And I think that's what you're saying too, is that we don't have to think the same and we can still be tremendously productive.
Absolutely. And I think the key might be just stay in relationship. Stay in relationship.
Yeah.
Even when it's rocky.
Yeah, I agree with you. You've been awesome again. Tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Probably the best way is to get on my website, which is riverlogictools.com. And once a month, maybe sometimes every 2 months, I'm giving some RiverLogic tips. So there's some content. And if you want to check out my book, you can get a few of the chapters for free. You can just download it. And so you can see if it actually lands for you. So,
yeah. Well, it landed again. I thought it landed really, really well. I really enjoyed you again, having you on the show. I thought was awesome. Folks, listen, this is the show. I say to you every week, you're in control of 3 things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. Right? I know that situations can be difficult. You can be in tough circumstances, but you can always control your attitude. You can always control your excellence. That's your effort. and you can always get back up again because it's up to you. I'm going to be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great book. It means it's going to be another great show. It's inevitable. And before I go, you know what? I want to say thank you to all of you out there who listen to the show, watch the show on DBTV, or listen to the show by podcast. You people on YouTube, and Bob, you on LinkedIn, give us a thumbs up. And you know what? As I say to you all over the world, and you know what it is, ciao, everybody.